I was lying on the cold hospital table moments away from giving my kidney to save my son. The lights were blinding, the doctors were ready, and my daughter-in-law's sharp voice echoed in my mind, reminding me I had no choice. But just as the anesthesia touched my skin, the doors burst open, and my 10-year-old grandson ran in shouting words that froze the entire room. He carried a secret that would shatter everything we thought we knew about why my son was sick. What he revealed changed our family forever and turned a surgery into a nightmare of betrayal and truth. If you are here, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Now let me take you back to the moment when it all began. I was lying on the cold steel of the hospital table, my body stiff against the hard surface as though I had already turned into stone. The white lights above me were blinding, pouring down in an endless stream that made me want to squeeze my eyes shut. Yet I kept them open because closing them felt too much like surrendering. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was the only rhythm in the room, but each sound struck me like a hammer against my chest. The scent of disinfectant filled the air, sharp and overwhelming, a reminder that I was about to give away a part of myself to save the son I had loved and raised with every ounce of my strength. The doctors moved around me in silence, their shoes whispering against the tile floor. A nurse arranged instruments on a metal tray, the soft clink of steel against steel echoing like distant bells. Dr. Armand Ruiz, the head surgeon, reviewed my file with a face that betrayed no emotion. Everything was ready. All that was left was for me to drift into unconsciousness, and when I awoke, I would be missing a kidney. My son Elias would be alive, but I did not know what would be left of me. I tried to tell myself it was worth it, that this sacrifice was the natural duty of a mother. But in the deepest corner of my chest, there was a heaviness, a whisper of unease that refused to fade. Through the glass wall of the operating room, I could see them. Serena, my daughter-in-law, stood with her arms crossed, her sharp eyes fixed on me as though she were silently commanding me not to hesitate. Next to her, her parents, Victor and Helena Cross, were speaking in low tones, their faces cold but triumphant, as if this operation was not only about saving Elias, but about winning a private battle that only they understood. Serena's lips moved faintly, whispering to her mother, but her eyes never left me. It felt as though she were controlling my breath, my choices, my fate, with nothing more than that unwavering stare. The nurse at my side prepared the syringe, the liquid inside catching the light in a glimmer that looked almost cruel. My chest tightened. I thought of Elias lying weak in a room nearby, his once strong body reduced to frail skin and sunken eyes. He had always been my pride, the boy who once carried baskets of bread for me when I was too tired, the young man who worked long hours to support the family, and now he was a shadow clinging to life. I told myself this was the right thing. A mother must do what a mother must do. Yet a hollow ache spread through me, a strange emptiness that no amount of reasoning could fill. The air shifted. A sudden burst of noise cut through the stillness. The heavy doors of the operating room slammed open, and a rush of cold air swept in. The metal tray rattled, a pair of forceps clattering to the floor with a deafening crash. All movement in the room froze. My heart thundered against my ribs, the monitor beside me, screaming its steady beat louder than ever. Slowly, I lifted my head as much as the straps would allow, my vision blurred by the light. At first, I thought it was a dream, that the fear I carried had finally turned into a hallucination. But then I saw him, Leo, my 10-year-old grandson. He burst into the room like a storm, his small shoes splattered with mud, his school uniform wrinkled as though he had run straight from the street. His chest heaved with every breath, his round face pale, but his eyes burned with a determination far too strong for a child his age. He clutched an old tablet against his chest, gripping it as though it were a shield that could protect us both. Behind him, a nurse hurried in, her voice panicked, begging him to stop, but Leo did not stop. His gaze locked on me, and in that moment the entire room seemed to fade, until it was only the two of us, grandmother and grandson, bound together by something no one else could see. "Grandma," he said, his voice trembling, yet clear enough to pierce through the silence. "I have to tell the truth about why Dad is really sick." The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and unshakable. My breath caught my chest, aching as though someone had struck me. The doctors stood still, their hands hovering over instruments. Dr. Ruiz frowned deeply, then raised his hand. "Hold everything." His voice was sharp, commanding. "Whatever this boy has to say, he will say it now." On the other side of the glass, Serena's composure shattered. She pounded on the door with her palm, her voice rising into a shriek. "Do not listen to him. He is just a child. He does not understand." Her voice cracked, and for the first time I saw something in her face that unsettled me more than her coldness ever had. Fear. Pure shaking fear, as though she knew a secret was about to escape her grasp. Leo took a step closer, his small body trembling but his eyes never leaving mine. I could see the weight he carried, a burden far too heavy for his little shoulders. I wanted to rise, to pull him into my arms, to shield him from the sterile brightness of this cruel room, but I was strapped down, powerless. The tablet in his hands shook, but he held it up as if he was ready to reveal everything. The silence was unbearable, every second stretched thin as a blade. My heart beat faster, not just with fear of the surgery, but with dread of what he might say. What truth had he uncovered? How much did he know? Memories surged through me like waves crashing against rocks. The nights I had seen Serena whispering in the backyard, her voice low and hurried. The strange, unmarked bottles hidden in corners of the house. The way she had once slipped something into Elias's drink when she thought no one was watching. I had told myself I was imagining it, that my doubt was a betrayal of my son's wife. But now, looking at Leo's pale face, I knew it was no coincidence. There was a reason he had come running here, into a place where no child should ever be. He had seen or heard something that might change everything. The doctors stood in silence, their eyes shifting from me to the boy, waiting for him to speak again. Serena screamed from behind the glass, but her voice sounded distant, drowned out by the thunder of my pulse. Leo clutched the tablet tighter, his knuckles white, and took another step forward. His lips parted, his voice soft, but filled with a strength that silenced the entire room. "Grandma," he said, "I know what they have been hiding." My chest clenched. I could not breathe. My mind raced with questions I did not dare ask. What did he know? What secret had he discovered? What truth was so urgent that he would storm into an operating room to save me? The room was still. The air was heavy. And as Leo raised the tablet in his trembling hands, I realized that the story of my family, the truth I had avoided, was about to come crashing down on all of us. Leo's words struck me like a thunderclap, but before I could process them, my mind pulled me backward, dragging me into the past. To understand why this moment had come, I had to return to the beginning, to the days when I believed my family was whole, when trust still lived in the walls of my home. I remembered the old coastal house where I had spent most of my life. Its cracked walls smelled of sea salt and fresh bread, because every morning before dawn I rose to knead dough in my tiny bakery. I worked until my hands were raw, then returned home to care for my husband Mateo, whose body had betrayed him years ago. An accident had left him in a chair that squeaked whenever I pushed it across the stone floor. He could not walk, he could hardly speak, but he remained with me, his presence, a silent weight in the corner of every room. Sometimes his eyes filled with tears when I spoke to him, and in those moments I felt less alone. Still, the burden of holding the family together fell on my shoulders. My sons were my hope. Elias, my eldest, was tall and strong. He worked in construction and often came home, covered in dust, but smiling as though nothing could break him. When I looked at him, I saw the future I had always wanted for my family, a man who would never let hardship defeat him. My younger son Jonas was different, quiet, observant, steady as stone. He became the one I relied on for small repairs, for silent support, for the calm presence that eased my weariness. Between them, I felt proud. Between them, I thought I was safe. But then Serena entered our lives. She arrived like a soft breeze at first, speaking sweetly, her beauty striking enough to turn heads wherever she went. She cared for Elias with apparent devotion, reminding him to take his medicine, cooking him meals with an attentive smile. Neighbors whispered that I was blessed with such a daughter-in-law. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to see her as the gift everyone said she was. Yet in quiet moments I noticed a glint in her eyes, sharp and cold, a shadow that flickered behind her charm. It was around that time that Elias began to change. At first he returned from work exhausted, brushing it off as nothing more than long hours. Then came the coughing, the pale skin, the dark hollows beneath his eyes. The day I saw blood on his hands after he stumbled from the bathroom, I felt my heart shatter. Elias insisted it was nothing, that he was fine, but I knew better. The hospital confirmed what I feared: his kidneys were failing. I would have done anything to save him, and Serena knew it. Her care for him only intensified. She arrived at my house with neatly folded papers, medical results covered in numbers and codes I could not understand. She sat across from me at my kitchen table and said in a voice that cut like glass, "Clara, only your kidney will save him. You are the only match. You cannot hesitate." I dropped the spoon I had been holding. The sound echoed in the silent kitchen. I wanted to ask questions, to search her face for compassion, but her eyes held only steel. That night her parents appeared at my door. Victor and Helena swept in as though my home belonged to them. They sat heavily in my chairs, their voices full of authority. "A mother must sacrifice for her son," Victor declared. Helena added, "If you refuse, the whole town will know you abandoned him." Their words wrapped around me like chains. I nodded, though my heart screamed with doubt. Elias, frail and tired, clutched my hand. "Mom," he whispered, "you saved me when I was small, when I fell from my bike, when I burned with fever. Save me now." His eyes, once filled with laughter, now reflected only desperation. How could I say no? How could I tell him that fear gnawed at me every time? Serena looked at me with that calculating stare, yet in those days when the weight pressed hardest on my chest, I found brief light in Leo, my grandson. He would run into my yard with his backpack bouncing, sit on the ground and play with his little toy cars. He told me stories about his school, about his dreams, but sometimes his innocent words sliced through me like knives. "Grandma," he once whispered, "I hear Mom talking at night. She says things about medicine, but it does not sound like the doctor." I forced a smile and told him not to worry, but inside dread began to grow. Jonas, too, began to notice things. He rarely spoke, but one evening as he fixed the broken lamp in the kitchen, he looked down at me from the ladder and said in a low voice, "Mother Serena hides bottles in the house, bottles without labels." He did not finish the thought, but his eyes told me everything. Still, I could not bring myself to accuse her. Not yet. The memories crashed over me like waves, pulling me back into the present, where I lay on the operating table, my grandson standing before me. The lines of past and present blurred together. The unease I had carried for months had led me to this very moment. Serena's demands, her parents' pressure, Elias's pleading eyes, Leo's whispers, Jonas's suspicions. All of it had been pointing here, to this sterile room, to this unbearable choice. Leo tightened his grip on the tablet, his small chest heaving as though the truth inside him was too heavy to hold any longer. Serena's frantic pounding on the glass grew louder, her voice shrill with panic. "Do not listen. He is confused. He is a child." But I could see it in her face, in the way her eyes darted, in the tremor of her hands. She was afraid of him speaking, truly afraid, and that fear told me more than any word she could have spoken. Dr. Ruiz stood by the table, his frown deepening, his eyes fixed on Leo. "Speak," he said firmly. "Tell us everything." The room seemed to contract, the walls closing in as silence fell once more. My pulse hammered in my ears. My skin prickled with sweat. The truth hovered on Leo's lips, a truth that could unravel everything, a truth that might explain the shadows that had haunted me for so long. He raised the tablet slightly, his hands trembling, his eyes wide and glistening. "Grandma," he whispered, "I have to show you what I found." And in that single breath, I knew the past I had been afraid to face was about to collide with the present. Leo's trembling voice echoed in the sterile operating room, and though I longed to hear what he had discovered, my mind drifted again into the maze of memories that had brought me here. It was not a single moment that chained me to this table. It was a series of relentless demands, of whispered pressures and heavy gazes that wrapped around my chest until I could no longer breathe. I remembered the day Serena cornered me in my own kitchen. The scent of herbs simmering in a pot filled the air, steam curling against the cracked ceiling. I had just placed a bowl of soup before Mateo, my husband, who sat slumped in his chair with eyes as empty as the ocean at dusk. Serena stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression cold as marble. "Clara," she said in a voice that was almost a command, "the doctor has confirmed it. Only your kidney can save Elias. There is no more time. If you love him, you must act." The spoon slipped from my hand and clattered into the pot, splashing broth onto the stove. My throat tightened, words stuck like thorns. I whispered, "I will do anything for my son," but the fear in my voice betrayed me. Serena's lips curved into a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Good," she said, then turned sharply and walked out, leaving behind a silence heavy enough to crush me. Not even a week passed before Victor and Helena Cross arrived uninvited. They entered my home as though it belonged to them. Victor's heavy footsteps shaking the floorboards, Helena's perfume thick and suffocating in the small space. They sat themselves in my chairs, their posture regal, their voices sharp. In my day, Victor rasped, parents gave everything for their children. A mother's duty cannot be denied. Helena leaned forward, her eyes glinting like knives. "If you refuse, what will people say? That you are heartless, that you abandoned your son. Is that the legacy you want?" I sat clutching the edge of the table, unable to breathe. The words hammered against me from every side. I wanted to scream that it was unfair, that no one else carried this burden, but my lips would not part. In the corner, Elias sat propped up on a chair, his body so thin it barely seemed to hold him. His hand reached out for mine, cold and trembling. "Mom," he whispered, "I know you will save me, you always did." His voice was a plea, his eyes reflecting only desperation. And in that moment I nodded, though inside my heart cracked. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of pressure and silence. Every morning I rose to bake bread, the smell of flour and yeast filling the house, but the joy it once brought me had disappeared. Each loaf I pulled from the oven felt like a stone added to the weight on my chest. When I went to market to sell my goods, neighbors smiled and praised Serena, calling her a devoted wife, a blessing to the family. Their words cut into me, for they did not see the sharpness in her gaze, the coldness in her voice when she thought no one was listening. At dinner, the weight grew unbearable. Serena sat beside Elias, serving him food herself, never allowing anyone else to touch his plate. Her parents joined us, often occupying the best seats at my table. They spoke of sacrifice and honor while their eyes pinned me down, daring me to object. Elias smiled weakly, whispering, "Thank you, Mom, I know you will save me," and my heart twisted with guilt. Jonas sat in silence, his eyes never leaving Serena. He did not speak, but I could see suspicion burning in him like a hidden flame. His spoon stirred his bowl without lifting a bite, his jaw tight as though holding back words too heavy to release. Once, when the room was thick with silence, he muttered under his breath, "Mother, you do not have to do this." But Serena's sharp glance silenced him before he could say more. That night I lay awake in my bed, the ticking clock on the wall pounding in my ears. Every second was a reminder that time was slipping away. I thought of Elias as a boy chasing me through the market, his laughter ringing out as he promised, "One day I will build you a grand house." Now he was a shell of that boy, lying weak and broken. How could I let him die? And yet, why did the thought of giving him my kidney feel like walking into a trap? The next morning, Serena arrived before sunrise. She entered without knocking, her voice sharp as a blade. "Clara, the doctor says there is no time. If you hesitate, Elias will not survive." She dropped a stack of papers on my table filled with numbers and signatures that blurred before my eyes. "Look," she said, pointing to the lines. "It is all here. You are the only match. Do you want his death on your conscience?" The kettle whistled behind me, steam filling the room, and I clutched it so tightly my fingers burned. I wanted to scream, to throw the papers in her face, but instead I whispered, "I will do everything for Elias." My voice was hollow, my body numb. Serena's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, and she left without another word. Later that night, Victor and Helena returned. They brought fruit as though it excused their intrusion, then sat in my living room, their voices heavy with judgment. "If you refuse," Helena said coldly, "your name will be shamed forever. People will whisper that you let your son die." Victor nodded gravely. "We are only reminding you of your duty." I sat with my hands trembling, staring at the floor. I wanted to shout that it was not fair, that they were not the ones who would be cut open, who would risk their life. But instead I nodded again, my voice caught in my throat. Elias looked at me with weak gratitude, while Serena smiled faintly, her eyes filled with triumph. After they left, I sat alone in the dim kitchen, tears streaming down my face. I thought of Elias's laughter, of Jonas's quiet strength, of Leo's innocent questions. I thought of Matteo silent in his chair, unable to guide me. The walls seemed to close in the smell of bread and herbs, suffocating instead of comforting. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, caged by duty and fear, and yet through the haze of guilt and pressure, a shadow lingered in my mind. Leo's words, Jonas's suspicions, Serena's cold smile. Something was wrong. Something darker than illness or sacrifice was coiled beneath the surface, waiting to be revealed. I wiped my tears and stared into the flickering lamplight. My hand trembled as I whispered to myself, what if this is not about saving Elias at all? And in that question, the first crack of truth began to appear. The pressure of obligation pressed on me day after day until I felt like I could no longer breathe. I tried to push away the unease gnawing at my chest, but no matter how many loaves of bread I baked, no matter how many nights I stayed awake watching over Elias, the shadows in my mind only grew darker. It was not just fear of the surgery. It was the way Serena moved, the way her parents spoke, the way whispers seemed to cling to the walls of my home. Leo was the first to crack the silence. One afternoon he sat in the yard playing with his toy cars, the sea breeze tossing his hair across his forehead. His little hands pushed the car back and forth across the dirt, but his eyes were distant. Finally he looked up at me with a seriousness no child should carry. "Grandma," he said, "what if someone is making Dad sick on purpose?" The words struck me like a slap. My hand froze on the basket of bread I was preparing for the market. I tried to smile, tried to keep my voice calm. "Why would you think that my boy?" He lowered his head, his small voice barely audible. At night I hear Mom whispering on the phone. She talks about doses, about medicine. But she does not sound like she is talking to a doctor. My heart raced, but I ruffled his hair and forced a laugh. "Do not worry," I said. "I am sure she is just asking the doctor questions." But inside a storm began to gather. That night as I lay in bed, Leo's question echoed in my mind like a bell. What if someone is making him sick? Jonas soon gave me another reason to worry. He came by with his toolbox, as he often did, and climbed the ladder to repair a flickering lamp in my kitchen. The light sparked once, then steadied, casting shadows across the room. As he came down, he looked at me with eyes full of unease. "Mother," he whispered, "I saw something." I turned quickly, my heart in my throat. "What do you mean?" Jonas's jaw tightened. "In Elias's cabinet, there are bottles with no labels. Serena hides them behind the prescribed medicine." His words sent a chill down my spine. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. The plate I was holding slipped into the sink, shattering against the porcelain. Jonas grabbed my arm. "I do not trust her," he said. "I think she is hiding something. I wanted to deny it to defend my daughter-in-law for the sake of peace, but I could not. My silence was answer enough." Jonas left soon after, his eyes dark with worry. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the broken pieces in the sink, my hands shaking. Days later, I found myself at the hospital with a bowl of soup for Elias. The room smelled of antiseptic, the walls blindingly white. Elias lay weakly on the bed, his body frail, but his eyes brightened when he saw me. "Mom," he whispered, "you are always here." His smile was thin but real. I sat beside him, spoon in hand, when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. Serena, sitting by the bed, was holding a glass of water. Her movements were smooth, deliberate. She slipped a pill into the glass so quickly I might have missed it if I had blinked. The water clouded faintly, then cleared. My breath caught. "What was that?" I asked, forcing my voice steady. Serena turned, her smile stiff. "A supplement for his kidney," she said lightly. "The doctor prescribed it," but her eyes did not meet mine. Later, when Elias slept, I cornered the attending physician in the hallway. "Did you prescribe anything new for my son?" He frowned, flipping through Elias's chart. "No, his current medication is sufficient. No new supplements have been added." I froze, the doctor's words echoing in my ears. When I returned to the ward, my legs trembled beneath me. I glanced at Serena, who was sitting silently at Elias's bedside, her eyes fixed on the IV drip. My stomach twisted. She had lied. The shadows grew heavier. My suspicions hardened into dread when Jonas arrived at my house the next evening. He held out his phone with trembling hands. "I followed her," he whispered. "She went to the hospital parking lot. I took photos." On the screen, blurry but clear enough to steal my breath, was Serena. She was handing a small package to a man in a black car. His face was hidden beneath a cap, but his hand reached out eagerly, taking the bag from her. In the next photo, he slipped her an envelope, which she tucked into her coat. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling my heart thunder beneath it. Jonas's eyes blazed with anger. "Mother," he said, "she is dealing with something dangerous. I do not know what, but it is not medicine meant to save Elias." I staggered back, clutching the table for support. My mind spun. If Leo was right, if Jonas was right, then Elias's suffering was no accident. Serena was not saving him, she was destroying him. The evidence grew darker still. That night Leo came again, his backpack heavy on his shoulders. He sat down and pulled out an old tablet with a cracked screen. "Grandma," he said softly, "I found something." His small fingers tapped at the screen until an audio file began to play. A voice filled the room. Serena's voice, low, hurried, whispering into the phone. "After the transplant, the results will be perfect. Do not worry, she will not dare refuse. The old woman knows her role." The recording ended, leaving only silence. I dropped the tablet onto the table, my hands shaking. Leo's eyes brimmed with tears, but he pressed his lips together and whispered, "I thought you should know." I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight, but inside I was breaking. The pieces were falling together into a picture I could not bear to see. The bottles, the pills, the late-night whispers, the envelope, the recording. Elias was not dying because fate was cruel. He was dying because someone wanted him to. I sat awake long into the night, staring at the flickering lamp in the corner of my room. Mateo sat silently in his chair, his eyes glistening though he could not speak. I wanted to ask him what to do to share the unbearable weight, but only his tears answered me. The storm outside rattled the windows. I pressed my hand against the table, whispering into the shadows. What if Leo is right? What if my son is being poisoned? The wind howled through the cracks of the house, carrying with it the echo of Serena's voice from the recording. "After the transplant, the results will be perfect." I shivered, clutching my shawl tighter. I knew then that I was standing at the edge of an abyss. One more step and the truth would consume us all. The whispers had grown into a storm, but what came next tore away the veil and left no room for doubt. My uneasy suspicions hardened into sharp fragments of truth, and every fragment cut deeper into my heart. It was no longer a matter of fear or doubt. It was betrayal, pure and merciless, and it stared me in the face at every turn. Leo returned one evening, his small figure framed in the doorway as the sun sank behind the horizon. He looked older somehow, his childish innocence shadowed by something heavier. In his hands he held the same battered tablet, its cracked screen glowing faintly. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, the lamplight flickering over his pale face. "Grandma," he whispered, "I need you to hear this." He pressed play, and a voice hissed through the speaker. It was Serena. Low hurried the tone, sharp as glass. "After the transplant, the test results will be flawless. Do not worry. The old woman will not refuse. She knows her role. This result is worth more than you can imagine." The words slithered into the room, filling the silence with poison. I pressed my hand to my mouth, my body trembling. The recording ended, leaving only the sound of the wind against the window. My grandson's eyes brimmed with tears, but he stared at me with determination. "I found it on Mom's old tablet," he said softly. "I thought you should know." I pulled him close, his small body shaking against mine, and whispered, "You are so brave, my boy." But inside my world crumbled. Serena's voice was undeniable. Her words were clear. This was not about saving Elias. It was about something else, something darker. The next day, Jonas came to me with his own discovery. His clothes smelled of oil and dust from his work, his hands rough and stained, but his eyes were fierce. He placed his phone on the table and showed me a series of photographs. "I followed her again," he said in a low voice. The photos showed Serena in the hospital parking lot, glancing over her shoulder as she handed a small bag to a man in a dark jacket. In another image, the man slipped her an envelope thick with money. The sight made my blood run cold. She was trading something. Medicines, perhaps. But for what? Jonas's voice shook with anger. "Mother, she is not helping Elias. She is destroying him." I tried to speak, but no words came. I gripped the table until my knuckles turned white, staring at the damning evidence in silence. That night I went to the hospital carrying a container of soup for Elias. The halls were quiet, the air heavy with the smell of disinfectant. Elias smiled weakly when he saw me, though his skin was pale and his voice thin as a whisper. "Mom, you are here already." His gratitude cut me deeply, for I knew I was keeping secrets even as I tried to protect him. I sat beside him, feeding him slowly. My gaze wandered to the nightstand, where I noticed a white plastic bottle half hidden beneath a napkin. My chest tightened. I reached for it. The label was missing, the bottle filled with small blue pills. Before I could read further, Serena snatched it from my hand. "They are just vitamins," she said, her smile stiff. "The doctor prescribed them." But I had already asked the doctor. I knew she lied. I could see it in the tremor of her fingers and the tightness around her mouth. I forced myself to remain calm, but inside my fear had hardened into certainty. That evening, Leo returned once more, clutching the tablet as though it were a lifeline. "Grandma," he said, "there is something else." He played another file. Serena's voice filled the room again, this time joined by Helena's. After the transplant, Helena said coldly, "We will have the data we need. We can sell the formula abroad. The profit will secure everything." Serena's voice followed, sharp and certain. "The old woman will not refuse." "She cannot." I covered my face with my hands, my tears streaming uncontrollably. Leo reached out, his small hand resting on mine. "Do not cry, Grandma," he whispered. "At least we know the truth. The truth." The word echoed in my mind like thunder. It was undeniable now. Serena and her parents were not only poisoning Elias, they were using him. His suffering was their experiment, their profit, and I, blinded by love and guilt, had been walking willingly into their trap. I wanted to scream, to drag Serena into the street and expose her lies. But fear silenced me. If I spoke too soon, they would deny it. They would twist the truth and paint me as a desperate woman clinging to suspicion. I needed more proof. Jonas, too, refused to remain still. He returned to the hospital the next day, slipping through the corridors like a shadow. When he came back to me that evening, his face was pale with rage. He had taken another series of photos. This time, Serena and Helena stood by a black car handing a package to the same man. Jonas's voice trembled as he spoke. "Mother, I heard her. She said the money will change everything once the transplant is complete." My stomach twisted. I looked at the photos, then at Jonas, then at Leo's tablet. Each piece of evidence formed a puzzle I had refused to see. The bottles, the pills, the recordings, the secret meetings. Elias was not dying by chance. He was being killed slowly, methodically, for profit. I could no longer pretend. That night, as rain lashed against the windows and thunder rolled across the sea, I sat at the old wooden table with Leo and Jonas beside me. The lamp flickered, casting long shadows across the room. I looked at them both, at my grandson's innocent face and my son's determined eyes, and I whispered, "Tomorrow I will tell the doctor. Tomorrow I will stop this." But even as I spoke, dread gnawed at my chest, for I knew Serena and her parents would not let me escape easily. They had planned too carefully, controlled too much, and if they discovered that I knew the truth before I could reveal it, the consequences could be deadly. I wiped my tears and looked out the window where lightning lit the dark horizon. Somewhere in the shadows, Serena was preparing her next move, and I knew that the closer I came to exposing her, the more dangerous she would become. The storm inside me raged as the day of the surgery drew near. I had seen the bottles, the photos, the recordings. I knew Elias was not simply sick. He was being poisoned, used like a pawn in a game I did not understand. Yet even with the truth tightening around me, I could not bring myself to stop the tide. Serena's eyes followed me everywhere, sharp and merciless. Her parents' voices pressed against me, reminding me of duty, honor, sacrifice. And Elias, frail and desperate, whispered with a trembling smile, "I know you will save me, Mom." By then the hospital had scheduled the transplant. The night before, I sat in my dim kitchen, the rain drumming against the windows. Jonas stood by the door, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. "Mother, do not go through with this," he pleaded. "Serena has poisoned him, I know it. If you give her what she wants, she wins." His voice broke, but I could not answer. Elias's face haunted me. I thought of his childhood laughter, his dreams, his promises. I thought of Leo's frightened eyes when he showed me the recordings. I thought of the chains Serena's parents had wrapped around my heart with their words. I nodded weakly, but inside I felt I was already lost. The next morning I was taken to the hospital. The gurney wheels screeched against the tile floor, each sound a reminder of the path I could not turn back from. The fluorescent lights blurred above me. The scent of disinfectant choked me. At my side, Serena walked with calm steps, her face serene, but in her eyes I saw triumph. Behind her, Victor and Helena followed, dressed neatly as if attending a grand event. They shook hands with nurses, their voices falsely cheerful, their smiles wide. When they brought me into the operating room, the air was icy. The instruments gleamed under the light. Dr. Ruiz stood at the head of the room, his face serious. Nurses bustled quietly, attaching electrodes to my chest, arranging tools, preparing syringes. The heart monitor began its steady rhythm, each beep sounding louder than the last. Through the glass walls, Serena stood with her parents, their eyes locked on me. Serena raised her hand, gesturing to the consent papers. "Sign quickly," her gaze seemed to say. "Do not hesitate." My hand trembled as I took the pen. The ink bled across the paper, sealing my fate. I felt as though I had signed my own death sentence. The nurse prepared the syringe, the clear liquid glinting under the lamp. My chest grew heavy. I closed my eyes, thinking of Elias, of Jonas, of Leo. I thought of the recordings, of the photographs, of Serena's whispers. I wanted to scream, to stop everything, but my voice was caught in my throat. Then, just as the needle hovered over my arm, the doors of the operating room burst open. A crash of metal against metal echoed through the sterile air. Doctors gasped. A tray rattled, instruments clattering to the floor. I opened my eyes and saw him. Leo. My grandson stormed into the room, his uniform wrinkled, his shoes muddy, his small chest heaving with every breath. In his hands he clutched the battered tablet as if it were a weapon. A nurse chased after him, her voice frantic. "Child, you cannot be here. Stop." But Leo did not stop. He ran straight to me, his wide eyes filled with fear and determination. "Grandma," he shouted, his voice trembling but clear, "I have to tell the truth about why Dad is really sick." The room froze. The heart monitor beeped louder, the sound splitting the silence. A doctor dropped a pair of forceps, the metallic clang echoing against the tile. Dr. Ruiz raised his hand sharply. "Everyone stop. Let the boy speak." Behind the glass, Serena's composure shattered. She pounded on the window, her voice rising into a shrill scream. "Do not listen to him. He is just a child. He does not know what he is saying." But her eyes betrayed her. They darted wildly, her face pale, her hands trembling. Panic radiated from her like heat. Leo stepped closer to me, his small hands shaking as he lifted the tablet. His lips trembled, but his voice carried through the room. "Grandma, I found recordings." He pressed play. Serena's voice filled the air. "After the transplant, the test results will be perfect. Do not worry. The old woman will not refuse." Gasps rippled through the room. The nurses exchanged horrified glances. Dr. Ruiz's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. Serena's fists pounded harder against the glass. "Lies," she screamed. "He is lying. That is fake." But Leo was not finished. He tapped again, and another recording played. This time, Helena's voice was clear, cold as stone. "After this operation, we will have enough data to sell the medicine abroad. This money will change everything." The words hung heavy in the air. My vision blurred with tears. The betrayal I had feared was no longer hidden. It stood exposed, undeniable, spoken in their own voices. Dr. Ruiz's voice rang out sharp and commanding. "Stop the preparations. This surgery is cancelled." His eyes burned with fury. "This is not medicine. This is a crime." Chaos erupted. Nurses stepped back, some covering their mouths in horror. Serena screamed from behind the glass, her voice cracking. "He is being manipulated. They are lying. Do not listen." But no one moved to support her. The doors burst open again. Jonas rushed in, his face flushed with rage. He shoved past the nurses and pointed at Serena, his voice thundering. "You poisoned him. You thought we would never see it." He turned to Dr. Ruiz, his hands trembling. "She has been feeding Elias unmarked pills. She is destroying him, not saving him." Serena's voice cracked into a desperate shriek. That is not true. They are trying to ruin me. But her eyes betrayed her, wild with panic. Dr. Ruiz turned to the staff. This is a crime scene. Call security. Call the police. No one leaves this room. I lay on the table, tears rolling down my cheeks, my body trembling. Leo clung to my side, his tablet still glowing. Jonas stood like a shield between me and the window, and on the other side, Serena's mask of control shattered completely. She clawed at the glass, her parents gripping her arms as security guards rushed in. The truth was out. But in that moment, as alarms sounded and voices rose in chaos, I realized the storm had only begun. The lies had been exposed, but what came next would tear my family apart forever. Security flooded the corridor outside the operating room. The glass vibrated under the weight of shouts and hurried footsteps. Nurses stepped back, their faces pale, while Dr. Ruiz stood like a pillar at the center of the chaos, his voice steady and cold. No one leaves. This room is sealed. Call the police now. His order cut through the panic like a blade, and for a brief second, the room held its breath. Serena tried to bolt, but the first guard reached her and blocked the door. Her parents pressed close on either side, Helena whispering frantically, Victor gripping Serena's arm so tightly that his knuckles whitened. He glanced at the nearest doctor, then slipped a thick envelope from his jacket and held it low by his side, as if secrecy could turn daylight into shadow. "Let us through," he muttered. "We will resolve this privately. No one needs to ruin their career over confusion." Dr. Ruiz moved first. He stepped forward, took the envelope from Victor's hand, and let it drop to the floor. The bills fanned out across the tile like fallen leaves. His voice did not rise. "The law decides here, not money." 2 security officers closed in on Victor and Helena. A third stood squarely in front of Serena, who stared through the glass at me as if I had conjured the storm with a single breath. On the operating table, I could not stop shaking. Leo kept one hand on my arm as if he worried I might drift away if he let go. Jonas stood near the foot of the table, his eyes never leaving Serena. I could feel his fury like heat in the room, but beneath his anger lived fear. Fear that all of this had come too late. Fear that Elias was already beyond saving. From the adjoining prep room came a weak voice. "What is happening? Why is everyone shouting? Elias!" His words floated through the open doorway like a child calling in a dream. He tried to sit up, and a nurse hurried to stop him. He looked toward the glass, toward Serena, toward me on the table. His eyes were wide and glistening. "Mother, is the surgery over? Did you save me?" The question tore me open. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to rise from the table and gather him into my arms and tell him that he would be safe, that I would never let the darkness near him again. But my voice would not come, and the truth hung in the air like thunder. Serena lunged toward the door again, but the guard held fast. She turned on Dr. Ruiz, her voice raw. "They made those recordings. They are lying. My mother and I were trying to help." Victor lifted his chin, trying to reclaim the authority that had drained from him like sand. "This is a misunderstanding. Release us and we will clarify with the board." No one moved. The distant wail of sirens seeped through the walls. The hospital seemed to hold itself very still, as if the building knew that history had turned and was waiting to see where it would land. Helena was the first to crack. Her breath came in quick bursts, her calm veneer slipping. She reached for Serena's hand and squeezed hard. "Lower your voice," she hissed, then glanced toward security with a smile that did not touch her eyes. "We are distressed. That is all. My daughter has been under pressure. Perhaps she said things she did not mean. Perhaps recordings were taken out of context. Surely you can understand." Jonas stepped forward. His voice did not shake. "I photographed her in the parking lot with a man who paid her. I saw unmarked pills in my brother's cabinet." He turned to Dr. Ruiz. "Check the patient file. There were no such prescriptions. Ask the nurse who saw her near the medication cart. Ask the tech in imaging who heard her whisper about results." The room tightened around his words. Witnesses, timelines, paper trails, truth pressing its back against the door. Leo lifted the tablet again with trembling hands. "I can play more if you want," he whispered, looking at Dr. Ruiz rather than at Serena. The chief surgeon shook his head. That will be for the police now." 2 officers entered. The room stilled as if the air itself had braced for impact. They took statements rapidly, voices low, movements precise. When they asked for the recordings, Leo handed over the tablet with both hands, as if surrendering a relic. Jonas forwarded the photographs. Nurses added notes. One of them, eyes shining with distress, described how Serena had hovered at the medication station without authorization. Another recalled Helena's quiet meeting by the service elevator with a man in a dark jacket. Serena's posture crumpled, then straightened again as if the force inside her refused to break. She looked at Elias through the glass, her expression soft and desperate. "Believe me, they hate me. They want to turn you against me." She pressed her palm to the window. "I did everything for you." Elias swayed where he sat, the nurse gripping his shoulder, his face drained of color. He looked from Serena to me, and back again, and I watched the slow unspooling of trust behind his eyes. The gaze of a man who had spent months drowning, and only now understood why the waves never ceased. The officers turned to Serena, Helena, and Victor. "Come with us. We will continue this in a secure room." Victor tried one last time to command the moment, but his words clattered to the floor like the envelope had. Helena closed her eyes. Serena pulled back from the glass and took a single step that looked like surrender and defiance at once. When the officers touched her elbow, she flinched, then went rigid and allowed herself to be led away. The corridor outside swallowed them. The glass settled. The room exhaled. Dr. Ruiz faced me. His expression softened for the first time. "Mrs. Navarro, we are canceling the surgery." He spoke with grave clarity. "We will stabilize Elias with dialysis and adjust his medications under strict supervision. We will test everything he has been given. You do not need to sign anything else today." I nodded and only then realized how close I had been to falling apart. Jonas lowered his head, the tension draining from his shoulders. Leo climbed onto the step by the table and hugged me around the waist. His small body shook, but his voice was steady when he whispered that he was sorry for running into the room. I told him he had saved us. Not just me. All of us. An officer stepped back in and asked a few final questions. Dr. Ruiz gave instructions to secure the operating suite, to log the chain of evidence, to document every object and signature and timestamp. Order returned in measured lines. The nurse who had prepared the syringe placed it into a sealed bag. A second nurse recorded the cancellation, her hand controlled and neat. The chaos had not vanished. It had been pressed into paperwork procedure and the cold march of accountability, yet the human storm remained. Through the open doorway I saw Elias watching me. His eyes were red, not from illness now, but from grief. He lifted a hand as if to reach for me, then let it fall, ashamed of needing help, even as help was the only thing that could hold him up. I wanted to go to him, but Dr. Ruiz spoke gently. "We will bring you to him soon. First, we must release you from prep and check your vitals." Minutes passed. The sirens faded. Orderly footfalls replaced them. The hospital resumed its measured pulse, while my own heart beat hard and uneven. When they wheeled me into the recovery area, Elias was there, pale as a winter sky. He looked at me, and the space between us felt like a cliff edge. "Mother," he said quietly, "is it true? Did she hurt me? Did I beg you to do something that would have helped them and not me?" I sat beside him and took his hand. It was cold, but he did not pull away. I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell him that none of this was his fault, that love sometimes blinds us, that the worst wounds are those we cannot see. But my throat closed and only a whisper emerged. "We will find out everything. We will fix what can be fixed. We will not let them touch us again." Jonas stood at the doorway. His gaze softened when he looked at his brother, then sharpened when he glanced toward the corridor where the officers had gone. Leo leaned against my arm, finally tired, his eyelids heavy. For the first time all day, silence did not feel like a trap. It felt like a room where breath could return. Then the quiet shifted. Distant voices rose in the hall. A nurse hurried past with a chart face drawn tight. Another followed, whispering that the news had reached administration, that reporters were already gathering, that the story would not remain contained inside these walls. The hospital was bracing for the world. Dr. Ruiz returned a file under his arm, gravity in his step. "We will move Elias to a monitored unit," he said. "There will be new protocols." He paused as if weighing what to say next. "There is evidence of a larger network. This may reach beyond one family." The words hung there heavy as an approaching storm. A larger network, beyond one family. I felt Jonas straighten beside the door. I felt Elias shiver. I felt Leo grip my sleeve. The truth had broken the glass, but it had also opened a gate to something bigger, darker, and still moving toward us. "Prepare yourselves," Dr. Ruiz said quietly. "The next hours will be difficult." He was right. Outside, cameras were warming like eyes at dusk. Inside, the past had begun its reckoning. And somewhere between those two worlds, a final wave gathered its strength and rolled toward us, unseen but unstoppable. We were not done. Not even close. The hours after the collapse of Serena and her parents felt like a blur. The hospital returned to its steady rhythm, but beneath the surface the air carried a tension that no antiseptic could erase. Police officers moved quietly through the corridors, speaking in hushed tones to staff gathering statements and sealing evidence. The name Navarro echoed across clipboards and radio calls. My family, my story, had become the center of something much larger than I could have imagined. They moved Elias into a new ward, a small room where every machine beeped steadily and every nurse stepped carefully. His skin was still pale, his body still frail, but his breathing was more stable. They told me dialysis would keep him alive until new treatments could be adjusted. The poison that had once trickled into his veins without his knowledge would no longer reach him. For the first time in months, I felt that he was not sliding toward death, but clinging back toward life. Jonas hovered near him like a shadow. His eyes never left his brother, even when exhaustion painted heavy lines across his face. He adjusted the blankets, refilled water cups, spoke softly when Elias stirred. At last Elias whispered, "I am sorry." His voice cracked thin but clear. I trusted her. I led her into our home, into my life, and I did not see. I took his hand, cold but steady, in mine. "You were sick," I said. "You believed in the woman you loved. That is not your fault." His eyes filled with tears. "But I let you suffer. I let them force you into this." Jonas leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Do not blame yourself. They fooled all of us, but they will not fool us again." He looked at me then, his eyes burning with determination. "I will protect you now, Mother. Whatever comes, I will not let anyone hurt you again." His words were not soft, but they carried the weight of a promise forged in fire. Leo became the small light that guided us through those heavy days. He sat by my side, clutching his toy cars, his innocent eyes dulled by the secrets he had carried, but still filled with courage. Nurses passed by and smiled at him, whispering that he was the bravest boy they had ever seen. One evening he climbed onto my lap and whispered, "Grandma, I am sorry it took me so long to say something. But I saved you, did I not?" His question broke me, and I hugged him tightly, tears spilling onto his hair. "Yes, my boy, you saved us all." News spread faster than I could comprehend. Headlines appeared in the morning papers: illegal drug ring exposed at Coastal Hospital, investigations into experimental trials, arrests linked to international network. Serena's name appeared alongside her parents. Their faces stared back from ink and screens, no longer hidden behind polite smiles and false charm. They were being charged not only for poisoning Elias, but for trafficking experimental medicines, for conspiring to profit from suffering. Neighbors, who had once praised Serena, now looked at me with pity and shame. Some brought bread, others offered apologies as though their words could mend the wounds carved into my family. I accepted their kindness, but inside I carried a scar too deep for comfort. Elias began to improve slowly. The dark circles beneath his eyes lightened, and though his body remained weak, he no longer coughed blood or trembled in agony. Each day his voice grew stronger. He asked questions about what had happened, but I spared him the darkest details. He did not need to know every whisper, every late-night phone call, every pill slipped into his water. It was enough that he knew the truth, that the lies had been stripped away. One afternoon he reached for my hand, his voice thick with emotion. "Mother, I was blind. I almost let them take everything from you. I will never forget that you stood by me even when the world tried to break you. I stroked his hair like I had when he was a boy, and told him what mattered most was that he was still here, that he was still breathing. Back at home, the silence felt different. It was no longer suffocating. Mateo sat in his chair, his frail hands resting on his lap. I told him everything: the recordings, the photos, the moment when Leo burst into the room. His eyes glistened and 2 tears rolled down his cheeks. I took his hand, and for the first time in years he squeezed mine, weak but unmistakable. That single gesture was enough to tell me he understood, that even in his silence he was still with me. Leo's laughter returned slowly, but it carried a new weight. He was a child, yet he had been forced to bear a secret that even grown men would tremble under. I promised myself I would protect his innocence, that I would not let the shadows of our betrayal steal his light. He became the hero of the neighborhood children, whispering about how he had saved his grandmother and his father. But to me, he was more than a hero. He was proof that truth, no matter how small the voice that carried it, could break through the darkest lies. In the weeks that followed, I began to write again in my old diary. Late at night when the house was quiet, I lit the oil lamp and let my hand move across the pages. "Blood does not always make a family," I wrote. "Sometimes truth decides who deserves to remain by your side." I lost the faith I once placed in others blindly, but I found something else. I found my own strength. The storm had passed, but its echo remained. Elias still faced a long road. Jonas carried the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Leo bore the scar of secrets too heavy for his age, and I carried the memory of nearly signing my life away. But we were still standing. The darkness had not destroyed us. And yet, even as calm settled over the house, I could not forget the words Dr. Ruiz had spoken. "There is evidence of a larger network. This may reach beyond one family." Those words haunted me in quiet moments. If such evil could hide in the smile of a daughter-in-law, in the laughter of neighbors, in the routine of a hospital, then who else was living in its shadow? Still, I chose not to dwell in fear. I chose instead to guard my family, to listen to the whispers, to trust the questions that rose in the silence, because truth may hide, but it always leaves traces. And I knew now that even the smallest voice could bring it crashing into the light. This story is not only about betrayal, but about courage. It reminds us that truth can come from the most unexpected place, even from the voice of a child. It shows us that blind trust can be dangerous, but that strength is born when we dare to face what frightens us most. Above all, it teaches us that family is not just blood. It is loyalty, honesty, and the courage to protect one another when the shadows grow too deep. If you found this story moving, please like this video, share it with others, and leave a comment telling me what you would have done in my place. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel so you will not miss more stories like this one.